Right. So financial fair play. That's what we're going to say. Don't hit the pause button or the stop button, right? Matt Slater and Dan Sheldon from The Athletic are here. Both have written plenty on FFP, club ownership and transfers. We're going to make this sing, aren't we, Dan?
Try to. We're going to try to. Matt will do a better job than I will.
Right, let
Oh, I
me
don't know
try that
about
again.
that.
Matt, you're going to
I'm
make
not
this sing?
singing.
There probably isn't a club that this doesn't affect. And you can go down, if you're looking just within England, Matt, you can go down the leagues for this.
Yeah, you certainly can. So I would argue that financial fair play hasn't been a particularly big issue for the big clubs in the Premier League for a while. If we go back into history, I don't want to go too much into history because we really will be here all day. But broadly speaking, financial fair play is about 10 years old, maybe a bit longer than that. And there were sort of kind of two strands to it. UEFA got very alarmed at the sort of late noughties about the number of clubs that owed their tax authorities huge amounts of money, and there were various clubs sort of teetering on the brink all over the continent, to be honest. And it was this sort of huge debt to the public authorities that was frankly embarrassing. So UEFA under Michel Platini started to sort of think about salary caps, soft salary caps, because salary caps, we often talk about, comparisons with North American sport, are very controversial here because of the European Union and competition and just totally different tradition. And, we're just starting from different places. So soft salary cap. So a way of sort of encouraging teams to spend within their means, and how you do that. So you sort of tie spending, your ability to go out and buy players and pay them whatever you want to pay them, to your revenue, right? Pretty simple, right? Spend what you've got coming in, and hopefully it all adds up and evens out, and we've got sustainable businesses. So that was sort of European FFP, and their key concept was this break-even rule, which PSG, Man City, we've been around the houses. It's been sort of 10 years of these cases. Do you break even, yes or no? And is the amount of money that you're bringing in legitimate? Are you being honest about the amounts you're spending? And then with this sort of a little bit of kind of a safety net where you have some allowable losses, and that was phased in. So we're going to let teams lose a little bit of money as long as it's backed up by equity, i.e. the owners are good for it and putting it in. And that's broadly speaking worked. Oh God, that's another massive debate about how it's worked and whether it's worked in the right way, but it's of course worked. Now the Premier League rules, broadly similar. Again, that kind of break-even concept. The impetus there was really the embarrassment of Portsmouth. A Premier League club should never go into administration. Portsmouth did. It went bust, and that was deeply embarrassing to the world's most successful blah 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 league. So they sort of brought in FFP rules of their own. As I said, they're kind of related to the UEFA ones with a much bigger safety net. So really, the Premier League rules have come in, and no other club, Everton, has got anywhere near breaking that, and it hasn't really been an issue. It's only really been an issue in the European context because that allowable loss was so much tighter. But again, no Premier League clubs have ever really got close to it. We've had some big cases. Man City obviously is the most famous one, but that was really more about the source of their revenue, as opposed to, are you close to this number, yes or no? It was about the source of the revenue. So we've had that. They're all changing. I can't stick all that into this answer, but that's where we've been. And I suppose the other thing I probably should add is FFP has been very significant in the English Football League. So their rules, again, like the UEFA rules, the break-even concept, but with an allowable loss much tighter, much closer to that sort of European thing. So just, without throwing too many numbers out there, you could lose 39 million pounds over 3 years, 13 million pounds a year. Now, lots of clubs have failed that, have breached that limit, and have lost points. So being a factor in the EFL, being a factor for many clubs, several clubs on the continent, in Europe, because you need to pass the rules to play in European club competitions, hasn't really been an issue in the Premier League at all.
And if you sort of unpick some of that, Dan, from Matt, not only are rules different depending on competitions, and you could both talk domestically and European wide, different clubs read the rules differently. as well.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, especially at the top end of the Premier League, you've got, clubs that will be relying on some of the best lawyers around to advise them on what they can do, what they can't do, where are the loopholes in the rules that they could potentially exploit. I think all you have to do is just look at the contracts Chelsea have been handing out, that goes back to the summer with the deals they gave to Fofana and Cucurella, which were long at the time, but no one really talked about it then. But then January comes around and they're handing out kind of 8.5-year deals to Mudryk, and all of a sudden people get talking about that. And that's just Chelsea looking at a loophole and thinking, well, let's exploit that, and let's, kick these numbers down the road and like amortize all of this money over 8 years rather than 5. Now that is all with FFP in mind. UEFA have obviously been quite quick to that because clubs have been moaning about it and they're going to close that loophole. But that just goes to show you that clubs are trying to seek any kind of competitive marginal gain through any kind of loophole that may exist.
Because that appears to be the hot topic at the moment, Chelsea and the long contracts. Dan has spoken, Matt, there about UEFA trying to change that loophole. So that if UEFA are doing that, that would only affect a club if they qualify for a UEFA competition, wouldn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Well, look, I should probably explain because I think we've skipped a bit. So my first answer, I sort of did the history of FFP. We need to say that UEFA's rules have changed significantly. So they changed last year. So we had 10 years of old FFP, this break-even concept. Now, because of COVID, which put a real strain on the sort of football industry, UEFA, Premier League, they all had to relax their FFP rules, make understandable allowances for the fact that clubs were playing behind closed doors and TV contracts, there were rebates and et cetera, right? So FFP became very confusing for a few years. So you had, right, we got to look at it again. I think also there was a sense that we have to look at it again because UEFA had lost a couple of really big cases, the Man City case, and that sort of caused the rest of the industry to go, what's the point with these rules? Do you have any teeth or not? And I think also there was probably a third pressure, which was from clubs, challenger type clubs like Man City and PSG and any or Chelsea under new ownership, saying, well, look, we have money. Why can't we spend it? Why can't we spend our money? We're good for it. We're good for it on making the product better. So they wanted a bit more flexibility on that kind of how much can we lose every year element. UEFA, almost like the quid pro quo, was like, all right, we'll let you lose a bit more money, but we're also going to sort of maintain that concept of sustainability. We're going to sort of double down on that. We want you to be that soft salary cap idea. So they've come up with this new idea, genuinely new, genuinely interesting. And this is why I think it's become a good conversation again. And this is why we get to the Chelsea loophole. They've added this element called the squad cost control. So that's it, squad cost control rule. All right, I'll try and do this as quickly as I can. So the idea here is to limit the amount of money clubs can spend on putting the team on the pitch. So this is about your player wages, what you pay your manager and the coaching staff, your transfer fees, and anything you pay to agents. So really, the money you spend on the team. Okay, we're going to say that you can spend only 70% of your total revenue, everything you bring in, on the products on the pitch. We'll let you take off from the top bit of the equation, if you like, all the bad bits, the wages and the transfer fees. We'll let you take off any profit you make on player sales. All right, so that comes off the numerator. The denominator is that big, taking you back to school here, is the big revenue number. Yeah. Now, the idea is 70%. But they're also going to say, we're going to give you a few years to get there. So next season, it's 90. The following season, it's 80. It's only 70%, that limit, which I think will be challenging, genuinely challenging. A lot of clubs are breaching it at the moment for the 2025-2026 season. This year's a free hit, it's 100%. Next year's 90, which I think will be interesting for some clubs, 80, 70. So that's the thing to have in your mind. And that is why every single club, every single big club, I would argue for the first time in a few years, including all the Premier League clubs that have not really worried about it, are right now doing a massive FFP compliance process. And they are inviting consultants in. They're having chats with UEFA and saying, How close are we? Right. Okay. We've got to get there in a few years' time. Let's have a look at the rule book. Right. So amortization, we should have a little chat about that. So amortization is just an accounting practice. It's how you write down the cost of buying an asset. So in a football context, your asset, your players. So how do you write that in your accounts? How do you write down paying £30 million for a player? Well, you do it over the course of their contracts. Is that weird? No, think about it. At the end of a contract, the asset's worth nothing. Bosman, go away for free, right? So you do it in a straight line basis. Your amortization cost is 10 million a year, 3-year contracts, 10, 10, 10 equals 30. But the other half of that is how you put it down as an asset in your books. The asset depreciates, amortizes by 10 every year. So the player is worth 30 million when you buy him, 20 million after year 1, 10 million after year 2, 0, again, going to 0, amortizing to 0. So that's the idea. Your transfer costs for FFP bases are your amortization costs, your annual amortization cost. Now, to go to Dan's point, the Chelsea trick, if you like, is to buy a £50 million player, or I'll try and do the sums easier, £100 million, an £80 million player, £80 million player, and ordinarily give them a 3-year, 4-year contract. Let's say 4-year contract. That's a 20 million charge every year. I'm going to give him an 8-year contract. That's a 10 million charge. You've halved your amortization bill for that player.
2 other things on that then, right? That's a great explanation. 2 other things on that. These new rules that are coming in to eventually get to 70% of revenue on what you put on the pitch.
Yep.
You can offset player sales against that. Yeah.
Correct.
Any owner investment allowed on that?
Not on the squad cost rule. So at the same time as carrying on with at the same time as bringing this new squad cost thing, which I think is genuinely interesting, and I think will be a conversation for the next few years, they're carrying on with that old break-even rule, but they're actually relaxing it. So instead of being able to lose 30 million euros over 3 years, so effectively 10 million euros a year, they're doubling it, saying, guys, you can use 60 million, 20 million euros a season. And here's the nice bit. They're actually saying if your balance sheet is positive, so you've got a nice stadium and a training ground, and you've got lots of players, and you're positive, you're in a net positive position on your balance sheet. We're gonna reward you. You can lose 90 million over 3 years. Now they've basically almost taken the break-even element out of the equation. Only for really kind of flagrant basket case type clubs. I can't really see any Premier League clubs failing that. The squad cost control rule is going to be a factor.
Okay, and then the second point, and then I'll bring Dan in again. Goes back to how we started this whole answer. If I am, let me pick a deliberately well-run club, so I'm not casting any aspersions. If I'm Brighton,
yeah,
okay, and I go berserk and spend 90% of revenue for the next decade, every year for the next decade, 90% of revenue on what's going on the pitch, but I never get into the Europa League or the Champions League. So what? Because this is a UEFA rule, not a Premier League rule.
Correct. Yeah. Come
So
eighth every year. Win the FA Cup. No, well, that gets you to Europe, doesn't it? Yeah, come 8th every year. Losing the final.
Right. Yeah. Right. So which highlights
it does.
the whole issue of different organizations with different rules, and when they come into force on your club and when they don't. Where do the Premier League sit in all of this? Because the Football League have tried to implement theirs, Matt, haven't they, to try and protect a lot of clubs from gambling or going bust. UEFA are doing this, well, basically to try and protect heritage clubs on the one hand, and secondly, to try and limit the power of the Premier League to a certain extent, so their competitions don't become Premier League dominated. So where do the Premier League sit, and what do the Premier League do?
Well, so I suppose let's go back to that break-even concept. So I explained that the basic philosophy there. The key difference between the UEFA rule was just the amount you can lose. So let's just get into the numbers. So it was 30 million euros, so 10 million euros a year for UEFA. For the Premier League, 35 million pounds. So £105 million over a 3-year period. It's always a 3-year rolling period. So you can see it's a big difference. Now, the Premier League's point is we don't need to be so prescriptive. We don't need to be so cautious as UEFA, because our clubs have this guaranteed broadcast money and we share it more fairly, more evenly than the other leagues do. And we are attracting, a lot of this is sort of, it can sound a bit arrogant, but it's actually kind of borne out by the evidence. We're attracting a different class, different level of wealth as our ownership group. They're all good for it. We are trade. Our clubs will trade. Look at the clubs the players they buy, but equally can sell. And they'll just sort of say, well, look, pre-COVID. I mean, COVID obviously sort of threw everything up into the air a little bit, but pre-COVID, Premier League clubs, they weren't like rolling in it. They weren't like making massive profits, but most of them were just about breaking even. Some of them were making, every now and then they'd make, oh wow, that's a proper profit. I think Liverpool 3-4 years ago made 100 million quid in profit. I think they went something like 30, 130. That's like an incredible sort of 3-year run. And Man City was starting to make regular profits, small profits, but regular profits. And everyone struggled in COVID. I suspect we're going to get back to that stage of most clubs making small profits or small losses. So the Premier League can say, look, we're working. If what UEFA are trying to do is to stop bankruptcies and to stop clubs owing the public purse money, we do that. We have a licensing system. We're very strict about that. Our clubs are paying their taxes and they're paying each other. They're paying their players. We're hot on that. We don't necessarily have to sort of tell people, rich people, how much money they can lose with their money. So that's the difference. It's a difference in philosophy, but I also do think it's a difference in necessity. The Premier League can say, we haven't had a business failure since Portsmouth. We haven't really come close. I've already whispered the club. But we haven't really come close. UEFA, that obviously has to look at the whole of Europe. Yeah, there's red lights on your desk. So that's the difference, I think.
And one thing I would kind of point to with the Premier League is, even if you look at the January transfer window and kind of how the Premier League still has so much more financial strength than all the other leagues across Europe, just look at what they're spending. Look at what's being spent in Spain, Italy, France, and then just compare that to the Premier League. It's chalk and cheese. I think over £400 million has been spent in the Premier League this January.
Yeah, I mean, at the time of recording this, so far in this window, the Premier League spent over £400 million, of which Chelsea have probably spent 398 million. No, I'm only joking.
Over 10 years.
Yeah. The Premier League have spent over 400 million. Bundesliga 42 million, Serie A 8 million, and La Liga 21 million. Which, if you want, I'm sure you don't need some context on this, but it means Leeds, for example, have spent more on one player than the combined spend of La Liga and Serie A, which is why UEFA and big European clubs, Dan, are concerned, because not that Leeds are doing anything wrong, but their product and their leagues get weaker by every transfer window the more the players arrive in the Premier League.
Well, that's why they all sat around a table and came up with the Super League, right? It was to get away from, it was to create their own kind of guaranteed revenues that the Premier League seemingly has through its broadcast deals. Those numbers you've just read out are startling when you think about it. I mean, that Leeds spending more than 2 leagues combined on one player, it's incredible. And again, just goes to show the Premier League is in a different market when it comes to the transfer windows. If there's a player available, in what world would a player have gone to? Okay, maybe not Leeds, but trying to think of like a middling Premier League club over one of the best teams in Italy. It just wouldn't have happened kind of 10, 15 years ago. Well, that happens now because the Premier League is the place to be. It's where all the money is. And is that going to stop? I don't think so. But perhaps the broadcast deals going to stagnate somewhat, especially domestically. I mean, overseas, they are probably still going to grow, but that trend isn't going to slow down anytime soon.
COVID hurt them all, but it didn't hurt them all equally. Premier League came out of it way better than the others. And it was the only one that during COVID actually managed to up their TV deals, significantly up their TV deals. The domestic deal was the same, but they got a third more, 33% up their international deals. And it's the only league in any sport anywhere that can say we're getting more money for our international deals than for our domestic deal. That is remarkable. NFL, NBA would oh my word. You know, they're making loads of money at home, so they're okay. But the idea that people in another country are willing to pay more than your own domestic market, I mean, that's just insane. So that's where the Premier League's at. And there are so many different ways we can sort of talk about this. Transfer spend last summer was the same, wasn't it? It was like 89% of the money spent was Premier League money. Deloitte did their money league list last week. And for the first time, one league provided the majority of the clubs, 11 out of 20 from the Premier League, 16 out of 30. Out of the top 30 from the Premier League. And there was a little note from one of the authors saying it's almost inevitable that all 20 Premier League clubs will eventually fill the top 30 spots.
Wow.
So that's pretty remarkable. That's where the rest of Europe's at right now.